Why this presidential election? How social media plays an influential role in this event. How much are political parties spending on the social media advertisement towards election? Does it do any benefit to them? Does it impact the election results? Today, we are going to talk about the sentiment analysis on 2020 US presidential elections based on our Twitter data.
This is Bharati, and with me are Robert, Siddhich, and Pranav. In today's agenda, we're going to talk about our introduction, why we chose Twitter, our code review, and what is our recommendation on this. So, before we dig into our code, this is an election of a president, and people ask why US don't have a prime minister. Because the authors of the United States Constitution decide against the parliamentary model and they prefer to stay in Republican style model. US has two major parties. First one, Republic Party, which is also referred as GOP, which is Grand Old Party, and their symbol is elephant. This party is led by Donald J. Trump. Second one is Democratic, which leads by Joe Biden, and the Democratic Party is also referred as DNC, which stands for Democratic National Committee, and their symbol is a donkey. As we see in this slide, these are the top social media sites in the US and its number of users in million. As we could see that there are 81.47 million users in Twitter. Twitter has been historically a most used platform used by politicians to reach to their base. Political parties are making their virtual campaigns and expressing their opinions and thoughts through their verified Twitter accounts. The below stat shows that the political party spends on advertisements on digital marketing close to $2.8 billion. Let's dig into our code. We started by mounting Google Drive to the Jupyter notebook for accessing the datasets.
Then, we imported all the required libraries to carry out the sentiment analysis. 1. The pandas library for data manipulation and analysis, numpy library for its multidimensional arrays, pyplot from the matplotlib library for creating visualizations, the regular expression module for extracting strings that match the given pattern, the Python imaging library for accessing image files, word cloud for visualizing data according to its frequency, NLTK, which is Natural Language Toolkit for semantic analysis, and finally, TextBlob for sentiment analysis. We'll talk more about these as we progress further. Once all the libraries and modules are imported, we read the tweets data for Trump and Biden using the read_CSV function and store them in the Panda data frames, which is df_Trump and df_Biden. Then we drop all the columns which are not of interest to us from both the data frames. The country name United States of America has been replaced with United States for consistency in both the data frames. There are a small fraction of records containing null values that might impact later, so we drop all such records from both the data frames using the drop_NA method. For visualization purposes, we had combined the data frames, therefore an additional column named candidate containing the candidate name was added and the data frames were concatenated into a single data called df_tweets. The df_tweets data frame looks like this. Now I would pass it over to Robert to continue further.
We are now going to run some exploratory data analysis to gain insights into the dataset. Firstly, it is essential to know the number of tweets for both candidates to ensure that we do not have biased data. So, we plot a bar chart by grouping the tweets in the df_tweets data frame based on the candidate name and by counting them. The kind equals bar parameter tells the plot function to plot a bar chart. The title parameter gives the title, tweet count, Trump versus Biden, to the plot. The edge color parameter gives the black boundary to the bars. The color parameter assigns the colors light coral and cornflower blue. to each bar representing the candidate. In recent years, Republicans have been represented in red and Democrats in blue in electoral maps, so Biden is the blue bar and Trump is red. From this graph, it can be seen that there have been about 200,000 tweets mentioning Trump, compared to about 165,000 Biden tweets. It is perhaps unsurprising to see that more people have tweeted about Donald Trump due to how controversial he is and the media attention he attracts. Overall, the data can consider to be approximately equally distributed. Next, we move ahead to find out which candidate received the most likes on tweets from random people mentioning them. We plotted a bar chart similar to the previous one, but on the sum of likes on tweets instead of on the count of tweets. Interestingly, tweets mentioning Biden have received more likes than those mentioning Trump. This is probably because Biden is a more popular man, especially outside of America. Next, we plotted another bar chart to identify the top 10 tweeting countries. To achieve this, we counted the number of tweets per country, sorted them in descending order, and stored the top 10 results for both DF Trump and DF Biden data frames. Then, using the merge function, we combine the results into a single data frame. And finally, we use the plot function to plot the details on a bar chart as we did previously. As seen in the graph, a large majority of the tweets were from the United States. This was to be expected as it is their presidential election. The United Kingdom is second for the biggest tweeting country, and then Germany, France, Canada, and India all closely follow. Next, we plotted the top tweeting sources similar to what we did for the top tweeting countries. The only difference being, instead of counting tweets per country, we counted the tweets per source this time. We can see that the Twitter web app, Twitter for iPhone, and Twitter for Android are by far the most preferred sources. Now, Kshitij will continue.
Here we have created an instance of the WordNet lematizer. WordNet is a lexical English database that establishes semantic relationships between words offered under the NLTK library. Lemmatization is the process of finding the lemma of a word depending on its meaning and context. For example, lemmatization would change the word meeting to meet, was to be, and better to good. We then define a list named stop_words to hold the list of all English stop words. Stop words are words that do not add much meaning to a sentence. They can safely be ignored without sacrificing the meaning of the sentence. For example, like, the, he, have, etc. Now we define a function named cleanTweet. The tweets contain hashtags, URLs, account mentions, emojis, and special characters which are not of interest and must be removed. We use a regular expression within the resub function that replaces all strings matching the given pattern with an empty string and converts the tweet to lowercase. We then split the tweets into a list of words using the word tokenize method. The for loop iterates over the list of words for each tweet and ignores if the word is a stop word, otherwise finds the lemma of a word, appends it to the list clean_tweet and returns the clean tweet after all words in the tweet have been looped over. Now we use the lambda function to apply the clean_tweet function on the tweet column for both Trump and Biden data frames. Upon completion, we see the clean tweets under the tweet column for both the data frames. Then we define another function named create_word_cloud. This function reads a cloud-shaped image as a NumPy array, generates a word cloud of 500 most frequently used words and plots it using the matplotlib library on the cloud-shaped image. The function is invoked on the tweet column for both the data frames and the word cloud is generated. Now I would like Pranav to continue.
Now that the tweets have been cleaned and lemmatized, we can use them for sentiment analysis, which is the process of determining the attitude or emotion of the writer. That is, whether it is positive, negative, or neutral. So we define a function named sentimentanalysis, which takes a data frame as a parameter and uses the sentiment function of the text blob library. The function returns two properties, which are polarity and subjectivity. Here, in the first statement, we use the lambda function to apply the text blob function to every tweet, extract the polarity, and assign it to the polarity column. Similarly, the lambda function is then used to extract subjectivity of every tweet and assign to the subjectivity column. And lastly, based on the polarity, positive, negative, or neutral sentiment is assigned to every tweet in the sentiment column. Then, the sentiment analysis function is executed one by one for both the DF Trump and DF Biden data frames. The output of the function looks like this. Here, polarity is a float value within the range -1 to 1, where 0 indicates neutral, +1 indicates very positive sentiment, and -1 represents a very negative sentiment. Similarly, subjectivity is a float value within the range 0 to 1, where 0 is very objective and 1 is very subjective. The subjective sentences express some personal feelings, opinions, allegations, desires, and speculations, whereas objective sentences are factual. Now that the sentiments have been calculated for all the tweets, we define another function named plot sentiment to visualize the overall tweet sentiments for both the presidential candidates. This function counts the tweets for all three sentiments, calculates their equivalent percentage, and concatenates them into a temporary data frame called dftemp, which is then used to plot a pie chart in the subsequent code block. Upon executing the function against both the data frames, it appears that there are 30.3% positive, 18.1% negative, and 51.6% neutral tweet sentiments for Donald Trump, whereas there are 34.2% positive, 12.7% negative, and 53% neutral tweet sentiments for Joe Biden. This indicates that there is some sort of correlation between the Twitter tweet sentiments and the actual election outcome. Here are our recommendations based on the outcome of the sentiment analysis. First, Twitter needs constant vigilance. As we know, Twitter handles a sheer volume of staggering data every minute. To retain its pristine image, Twitter needs to constantly pay attention to fake news, false claim, hate speech, etc., such as recently blocked former President Donald Trump's Twitter account due to his speech that provoked US Capitol riots. They should build their algorithm in a way to filter and avoid spreading fake news. Second, users should be socially responsible. At the end of the day, it's the Twitter users who create, share, retweet, endorse the content spreading throughout the Twitter feed. Users should think twice before creating or sharing any content. They should always keep in mind to forecast the implication of their actions. By doing so, Twitter would remain a great platform for one's freedom of speech. Thank you and have a nice day.